Another large storm will bring more severe weather to the United States today, including damaging winds, large hail, and even a few tornadoes. And then once we go into early next week, the weather pattern is going to continue to stay very active with more rounds of severe weather from the northern and central plains back into the Midwest and eventually into the Ohio Valley. In addition to this, Tropical Storm Beryl just formed in the Atlantic Ocean, and it could pose a risk to parts of the Lesser and Greater Antilles, Mexico, and it might even go towards the United States. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down everything that you need to know about all of these threats and much more. Let's begin though with what's happening across the United States as of early this morning, and overall it's been pretty active over the last 24 hours. We had another explosive round of thunderstorms across parts of Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and even Iowa, and we actually had several tornadoes yesterday in southwestern Iowa and also a brief one over in Kansas, but overall nothing too crazy. They were pretty brief and weak for the most part. Now this system is going to be moving into the Ohio Valley this morning and throughout the afternoon, and so we are going to continue to watch for damaging winds, large hail, and even a few tornadoes out of this particular activity, which is really actually all from this low pressure system that's back over in northern Minnesota. So that's what's going to bring a lot of the shower and thunderstorm activity for today. Now back over in the Gulf and as well as the Caribbean Sea, it looks pretty quiet, right? Well, it is for now, but we are expecting our first hurricane of the season and perhaps even a major hurricane as we go into next week. And we're going to talk more about that later in the forecast. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you stay tuned for that. Now, today's severe weather risk is overall not looking too crazy. We have a large marginal threat of severe weather that goes from Michigan back into the southern and central plains and also back into the northeast, which looks like a whale. We also have a slight risk for severe weather in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and even parts of West Virginia and Maryland. Now, the one crazy thing that might happen today would be the tornado risk back over in the Ohio Valley, which we're going to talk more in detail here about that in a second. But right now, the main concern for today is going to be damaging winds, upwards of 70 miles per hour. So just make sure that you're protecting loose lawn items and also hatching down trampolines. Now, today's hail risk is actually pretty low across the board. There's just a few areas where we might see some isolated large hail. Unfortunately, this whale that we had is kind of all messed up now in the hail outlook. So very interesting stuff there. And then the tornado risk for today is going to be a bit more elevated across parts of Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, Ohio, and West Virginia. We actually have a 5% tornado risk in place for those in eastern Ohio and as well as much of central and western and even northern Pennsylvania and extreme southwestern New York, where there will be a potential for a few tornadoes today. Now, I don't think we're going to have a tornado outbreak by any means today, but I definitely think today is a day that you want to be staying weather aware if you are in these areas. And if things do become more concerning later today, we will activate a live stream, so just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We will be talking more about the severe weather risk for today and tomorrow in addition to the timing, but before we do that, I want to tell you more about the sponsor of today's video. Today's sponsor is Factor Meals, the best meals that you can get delivered right to your doorstep. Factor Meals are all fresh and never frozen. Factor Meals has allowed me to bring you severe weather coverage for longer periods of time because Factor cuts down on grocery trips and cooking. These meals work great for me because they keep kitchen time to a minimum. I mean, look at this creamy chicken parmesan meal. It was a delicious meal. Factor Meals are ready in 2 minutes with no shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up even required. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you will always have new flavors to explore. Head to factor75.com or click the link below to use code MV50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That is code MV50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders, or click the link at the top of the description. Thank you so much for Factor Meals for sponsoring today's video. Their food is fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. Now let's talk more about the severe weather risk for tomorrow. And right now we have two different areas to watch for. We got one storm which will be eventually exiting the United States. This is the one that we'll be dealing with today. Main concern for tomorrow will be damaging winds and as well as hail and maybe even an isolated tornado or two, anywhere from New England back over into parts of the Carolinas. Then we're going to have an entering storm back over in parts of the high plains where we'll have another risk for severe weather weather, including some damaging winds, maybe some hail, and then maybe also an isolated brief tornado. But I think the tornado risk for Sunday in that particular area will be pretty low. I think it's going to be mostly a wind and hail risk in the high plains for Sunday. Tornado risk overall is going to be low, but it's definitely not zero if you're along the East Coast. So this includes areas like New England and as well as areas near Maryland and Delaware. So definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware. There's a fly on my camera. What in the world is happening? Today's tornado risk will basically exist all day today. We are going to have tornado parameter values that are low to very low for most of the morning. So I wouldn't rule out an isolated brief tornado this morning, but the risk really gets going as we go into the afternoon and eventually into the evening hours across parts of Ohio and eventually into Pennsylvania. So definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware. Now, the highest values will be during the afternoon and evening. That is when I think the greatest tornado potential will exist, but we could still see an isolated tornado before that with any storms that are out there this morning, because look at these photographs. They're actually pretty curved, meaning that we have a lot of spin throughout the atmosphere. So any storms that remain discrete or semi-discrete could produce an isolated tornado. With all that said, this is the timing for today, so showers and thunderstorms will be out there this morning. Again, I would not rule out an isolated tornado this morning, even though it's a very low chance. It's not zero. Once we get closer to this afternoon, storms will start to fire up more linear across parts of really northwestern Pennsylvania, western New York, and also northeastern Ohio. This is where the main concern for damaging winds will exist, and then eventually a tornado risk will start to increase here by about 3 to 4 o'clock, and eventually as we go into the evening hours, this will continue to march eastbound with mostly a wind risk going across most of Pennsylvania, and then eventually as we get closer to like 9-10 o'clock, these storms are going to start to move into parts of Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, and even other areas like Virginia where some isolated hail and wind will be a possibility. Here's a bit of a closer look at timing, by the way, for Ohio. So notice again storms firing off right around noon or 1 o'clock. Eventually these move eastbound. Again, any discrete cells will have the better chance of producing tornadoes. We could still see an isolated tornado though embedded in this line of thunderstorms. Eventually by 4 to 5 o'clock, most if not all of the storms will be out of Ohio by then. And then also back over in Pennsylvania, another little detailed breakdown for you. Showers throughout the morning into the afternoon. Eventually that line moves in around 3 to 4 o'clock. The better shot for tornadoes will be anywhere from 3 to 5 across parts of central and western Pennsylvania. Eventually this becomes more of a wind threat by about 6 to 7 o'clock, and I think maybe an isolated tornado could still be possible after 7, but overall the risk should be low in those areas. And again, there's a fly on my face cam. I don't know what's going on in this video. Here's what we're looking at for the central plains for today. Some showers and thunderstorms will be ongoing from southern Missouri back over into northern Oklahoma. These will be pretty sporadic. They're just going to kind of be your ordinary pop-up thunderstorms for this time of the year. The main concern will be large hail and damaging winds, and this will be mostly an afternoon threat, which could lead into the evening as well, but overall the risk of severe weather would be pretty low. Now, as we go into next week, we're going to have another large storm move into parts of the northern and central plains on Monday. This will lead to some more severe weather for areas like the northern and central plains, and then by Tuesday, I'm expecting another round for severe weather in the Midwest. Overall, damaging winds, hail, and maybe even a couple tornadoes will be possible. By Wednesday, we could have a pretty elongated area for severe weather, sort of like what we're seeing today, so that's something to watch for by Wednesday. By Thursday, another storm likely to enter into the country, which that could also bring severe weather for the 4th of July, and eventually into Friday and Saturday, things become more uncertain. The tropics are beginning to heat up, and honestly, if this doesn't prove to you that this year might be historic in the tropics, I don't know what will, because we have 3 areas that we're watching, one of which is Tropical Storm Beryl, and then we also have 2 areas of development which are definitely possible to develop into tropical storms over the next several days. But right now, Beryl is currently a tropical storm at the time I'm recording this forecast at sustained winds around 40 miles per hour. Now, over the next several days, this will be moving towards the Lesser Antilles. It'll start to bring hurricane impacts as we go into Monday morning across parts of the Lesser Antilles, and it is expected to get to a high-end Category 2 hurricane in the eastern and central Caribbean Sea by the time we go into late Monday evening and eventually into Tuesday. Now, this could become a Category 3 hurricane somewhere in here. Will it? I don't know, but it is possible, because in this sort of environment, where it is a very favorable environment right now in the Caribbean Sea, we could see a full-blown major hurricane develop here. Now, will it become a Category 4 or 5? I highly doubt it, but we cannot rule that sort of stuff out with the environment that we have in the Caribbean Sea this week. After this, it becomes very uncertain where it will go. Obviously, the cone of uncertainty is quite large, but I do think this is going to go more towards Mexico compared to the Gulf of Mexico. I would give it about an 80% chance that it crashes more into Mexico than it actually goes into the Gulf of Mexico, but we cannot rule that out quite yet. Here's what Beryl looks like right now, by the way, in the Atlantic Ocean. So again, a lot of thunderstorm activity. All that red is indicating very cold cloud tops aloft, so this is a pretty organized tropical storm as of right now. Long term, the ensembles are still indicating that this will likely go towards Mexico, but there is still a relatively high amount of uncertainty just due to the fact this is a newly developed system. Now, the Bermuda High is going to have to do a lot with the direction of this, depending how weak or strong it is. The weaker it is, the more likely this is actually going to go into areas like Mexico. The stronger it is, the more likely it'll eventually go into the Gulf of Mexico. So a couple things to watch out for there. Again, the current track's really leading this towards Mexico, but a couple are leading it into the Gulf. So something to watch out for long term. Now, how intense could this get? Well, many computer models are bringing this to a Category 2 or Category 3 intensity. So that will be something to watch for as it goes into the Caribbean Sea. A noticeable decline after that as it moves further into the western side of the Caribbean Sea. So it doesn't look like it'll stay as a major hurricane for very long if it does become a major hurricane. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.